In the secluded town of Elliot Hollow, nestled deep within a valley surrounded by dense hills, an eerie melody began to play on the local radio station, a haunting tune that would unravel the minds of its listeners and spread terror far beyond its borders. It wasn't just music, it was a whisper from something ancient, something that wanted to erase who they were, one mind at a time. The melody played endlessly, looping without end like a ghost trapped in a never-ending cycle. At first it seemed harmless, just a strange occurrence in an already quiet town, but soon people started noticing changes that shouldn't have been possible. And then came the dreams, the shared dreams where you weren't alone anymore, even when your eyes were closed. Welcome to Eerie Short and Scary Stories, the channel where we dive deep into the darkest corners of human experience and uncover mysteries that will make your skin crawl. Tonight's story is not just about fear, it's about losing yourself piece by piece until there's nothing left but echoes of what once was. Today we're diving headfirst into the chilling tale of the Signal of Elliot Hollow, a story about identity technology and the unstoppable force that consumed an entire town. By the end of this video you'll understand why some things are better left unheard and why the line between reality and nightmare can blur so easily. Stay with us as we unravel the truth behind this horrifying phenomenon. Trust me, you won't want to look away. Elliot Hollow was a town that seemed to exist in its own little bubble, untouched by the fast-paced advancements of the outside world. Nestled deep within a valley, surrounded by dense hills and thick forests, it was accessible only by one winding road that snaked its way through the wilderness. The town had a population of just a few hundred people, most of whom had lived there for generations. Life moved slowly in Elliot Hollow, and the townsfolk preferred it that way. They were cut off from modern technology, relying on landlines for communication and their beloved AM/FM radio station, 97.3 HOL Radio, for news and entertainment. HOL Radio was more than just a station, it was a lifeline. It played music, shared local gossip, and broadcast weather updates. Every evening, families would gather around their radios, listening to the familiar voices of the DJs who had been part of their lives for years. For many, it was comforting, a reminder that they weren't truly alone in their isolated world. But all of that changed one fateful day in the early 2000s. It started innocently enough. One morning, as residents tuned in to their usual programming, they heard something strange. A melody began to play, a haunting, wordless tune sung in an unrecognizable language. At first, it sounded beautiful, almost ethereal. Some thought it might be a new song or perhaps a test transmission. Others dismissed it as a prank, assuming someone had hacked into the station's frequency. After all, Elliot Hollow wasn't exactly known for being high-tech. But as the days went by, the melody refused to stop. It played continuously, looping over and over again, drowning out any attempt at normal broadcasting. Calls poured into the station, with listeners expressing confusion, curiosity, and even irritation. Greg, the station manager, tried everything he could think of to fix the issue. He checked the equipment, consulted with technicians, and even contacted the FCC, but no one could explain where the signal was coming from. It was as if it had appeared out of thin air, defying explanation. Despite the growing unease, some residents found comfort in the melody. Frank, the mechanic, claimed it helped him relax after long days of work. "It's like a lullaby," he said, smiling as he turned up the volume in his garage. Others, however, couldn't shake the feeling of dread that crept over them whenever they heard it. The postmaster, Mrs. Calloway, described it as unnatural, saying it made her skin crawl. Still, most people assumed it would eventually go away, just another oddity in a town full of them. What none of them knew was that this mysterious signal had roots far deeper than anyone could imagine. Decades earlier, during the height of the Cold War, Elliot Hollow had been chosen as the site for a top-secret government experiment codenamed Project Phase 1. Its goal was ambitious and terrifying. Scientists sought to create a shared cognitive framework using radio waves, effectively erasing individual identities and merging them into a single collective consciousness. They believed such a system could revolutionize society, eliminating conflict and fostering unity. Of course, it also raised profound ethical questions, but those concerns were brushed aside in favor of progress. The project quickly spiraled out of control. Test subjects experienced severe mental breakdowns, their minds unraveling under the strain of forced assimilation. Some claimed to hear voices whispering in their heads, while others reported vivid hallucinations of people who didn't exist. Eventually, the government shut down the operation, abandoning the relay station hidden deep within the northern woods. Or so they thought. Years passed, and the memories of Project Phase 1 faded into obscurity. Few in Elliot Hollow even knew it had happened. But the signal remained dormant, buried beneath layers of dirt and forgotten history. Then, one day, without warning, it reactivated. Perhaps it was a malfunction, or maybe it was waiting for the right moment. Whatever the reason, the melody now playing on HOL radio was no ordinary broadcast. It was the legacy of a failed experiment, a remnant of a time when humanity dared to tamper with forces it didn't fully understand. As the weeks went by, the effects of the signal became impossible to ignore. Strange occurrences began to ripple through the town, hinting at something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. And yet, the melody continued to play, indifferent to the chaos it was causing. For the people of Elliot Hollow, life would never be the same again. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Some of the townsfolk found the melody calming, a soothing balm to their otherwise monotonous lives. Frank, the mechanic, would hum it absent-mindedly as he worked on cars, claiming it helped him focus. Others, though, couldn't shake the unease that settled in their chests whenever they heard it. The postmaster, Mrs. Calloway, swore she felt her skin prickle every time the tune played, like tiny needles scraping against her nerves. But no one thought much of it at first, just another quirk in an already peculiar town. Then came the dreams. At first, they seemed normal enough, fragments of everyday life replayed in the subconscious mind. But soon, the lines between reality and imagination began to blur. Mrs. Calloway woke up one morning with tears streaming down her face, clutching the sheets tightly. She had dreamed of her husband, who had passed away years ago. In the dream, he stood in their old kitchen, speaking words she hadn't heard since his funeral. "Don't forget me." What made it worse was what happened next. Her neighbor, Mr. Peterson, approached her later that day, pale and shaken. He told her he'd had the same dream, or rather, he claimed to have witnessed hers. He described seeing Mrs. Calloway's husband through her eyes, standing there in the kitchen, saying those exact words. It was as if they had shared the same dream, living it together without realizing it. The occurrences didn't stop there. As days turned into weeks, the effects of the signal grew stranger, more unsettling. Miss Carter, a lifelong teacher known for her sharp mind and unwavering dedication, suddenly forgot her own name. One afternoon, while grading papers, she looked around the classroom and asked aloud, "Who am I?" Her students stared at her in confusion, unsure how to respond. By evening, she was convinced she was someone else entirely, a woman from a distant city with a life she couldn't remember. Henry Weaver, the affable general store clerk, began insisting he was the mayor. This wasn't just idle boasting. He truly believed it, down to the smallest detail. When confronted by John Harley, the actual mayor, Henry repeated verbatim something Harley had said during a town meeting days earlier. It was as if the signal had fused their identities, blurring the boundaries between them until neither knew where one ended and the other began. Alice Purdy, a childless woman who spent most of her days tending to her garden, became convinced she had a missing son. She sobbed uncontrollably, clutching photographs of children who weren't hers, recounting stories of a boy named Ethan whose laughter filled her memories, even though she had never given birth. Her friends tried to reassure her, But Alice insisted the memories were real, refusing to let go of this fabricated child who haunted her waking moments. Amidst all this chaos, Daniel Langley, a reporter for the Hollow Gazette, noticed a pattern emerging. Everyone affected by these bizarre phenomena had one thing in common. They had listened to the signal before bed. Intrigued, and more than a little terrified, Daniel decided to investigate further. Determined to uncover the truth, he chose to deliberately expose himself to the melody, hoping to experience firsthand whatever it was doing to the others. That night, as the low hum of static faded into the melancholic melody playing faintly in the background, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. At first, nothing happened. The tune wrapped itself around him, its haunting notes weaving through his thoughts like a gentle fog. But as sleep crept over him, the world shifted. He found himself standing in a version of Elliot Hollow that wasn't quite right. Buildings flickered between decayed shells and pristine structures, their forms unstable and shifting. Shadows moved unnaturally, elongating and twisting as if alive. And then he saw them, the people of Elliot Hollow, but not as he knew them. Miss Carter's face blurred and warped, alternating between her own features and those of another woman. Henry Weaver repeated phrases mechanically, his voice hollow and detached. A mother cradled a clone of herself, rocking back and forth as tears streamed down her cheeks. And in the distance, Abel Cooper, a blind man with a flickering second face, called out to Daniel, warning him of what was coming. "Every time we dream," he said, his voice echoing, "we lose a little more of ourselves." Daniel woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding. He realized then that the signal wasn't just affecting the town, it was rewriting it, piece by piece, consuming everything in its path. What he had discovered was only the beginning, and the true horror was yet to come. Daniel stumbled through the surreal dreamscape, his mind reeling from the bizarre sights before him. The version of Elliot Hollow he now inhabited was a twisted reflection of reality, where buildings flickered between states of decay and pristine perfection, as if caught in an endless cycle of destruction and renewal. Shadows danced along the walls, elongating and contorting in ways that defied logic. The air felt thick, heavy, with an oppressive weight that pressed down on his chest. The townspeople here were no longer recognizable. Miss Carter's face blurred and shifted, alternating between her own features and those of another woman, her eyes filled with a vacant stare. Henry Weaver stood frozen in place, repeating phrases like a puppet controlled by unseen strings. His voice echoed unnaturally, each word trailing off into silence before starting again. Daniel watched in horror as others transformed before his eyes, some merging completely, their bodies twisting and fusing until they became grotesque hybrids. A mother cradled a clone of herself, rocking back and forth as silent tears streamed down her cheeks. Nearby, a man stood rigid, his skin rippling and shifting, revealing writhing bodies beneath the surface, struggling to break free. Guided by Abel Cooper, the blind man with a flickering second face, Daniel pushed deeper into this nightmare world. Abel's warnings echoed in his mind. Every time we dream, we lose a little more of ourselves. His voice carried a sense of urgency, but also resignation, as if he knew there was no escape from what lay ahead. Following Abel's cryptic directions, Daniel made his way toward the northern woods, where the relay station was hidden, a relic of a forgotten era, buried deep within the forest. When he finally reached the station, its dilapidated exterior offered little hint of the horrors within. Inside, Daniel discovered records detailing Project Phase 1, the Cold War-era experiment that had attempted to create a shared cognitive framework using radio waves. The researchers' notes revealed their ambition and their hubris. They believed erasing individual identities would lead to a utopia of unity and harmony, but instead, they unleashed something far darker. As Daniel sifted through the documents, he realized the truth. The researchers themselves had been consumed by their own creation, becoming the first merged collective, trapped forever in a state of perpetual fusion. At the heart of the station was an active terminal, glowing faintly in the dim light. It pulsed with energy, almost alive, and as Daniel approached, it began to communicate directly with him. Words appeared on the screen, cold and clinical, yet dripping with menace. "We were the first to evolve," the message read. A pause followed, the silence heavy with implication. Then came the final declaration, "And now, you will join us." Panic surged through Daniel as the full weight of the revelation hit him. This wasn't just a signal. It was a weapon, designed to dissolve individuality and merge humanity into a single, homogenized entity. With trembling hands, he searched for a way to stop it. Finally, he located the transmitter, the source of the haunting melody that had ravaged his town. In a desperate act of defiance, he destroyed it, sparks flying as the machine sputtered and died. But when Daniel returned to the waking world, he found the damage already done. Back in Elliot Hollow, the effects of the signal had spiraled out of control. Conversations overlapped in uncanny unison, voices blending together until it was impossible to tell one person's words from another's. Teenagers spoke of lives they'd never lived, recalling memories of adults they'd never met. An elderly woman sobbed uncontrollably, clutching photographs of a childhood she couldn't possibly have experienced. Even the children weren't spared. Some whispered about parents who weren't theirs, describing homes and families that existed only in their minds. The horror had escaped the confines of Elliot Hollow. Daniel knew it wasn't enough to destroy the transmitter. The signal had spread beyond the town, carried on the wind like a virus. As he packed his things and prepared to leave, he caught snippets of the melody playing softly in the distance, drifting through the air like a ghostly reminder of what awaited the world outside. With every step he took away from the town, the dread grew heavier. He wondered how many other places would fall victim to the signal, how many more lives would be consumed by its relentless march toward conformity. And as he disappeared into the horizon, the faint hum of the melody lingered behind him, a chilling promise of things to come. Realizing that Elliot Hollow was beyond saving, Daniel gathered his few belongings and fled the town under the cover of darkness. The streets were eerily quiet as he drove away, the once familiar sights now distorted by the lingering presence of the signal. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was leaving behind not just a place but an entire community swallowed whole by something far greater than itself. As the miles stretched between him and the town, he allowed himself to hope. Perhaps he had escaped its clutches. But deep down, a gnawing doubt lingered. Weeks passed, and Daniel tried to resume some semblance of normalcy. He wandered from town to town, avoiding radios and any device capable of picking up frequencies. Yet, no matter how far he traveled, the memory of the haunting melody haunted him like a ghost. One evening, while stopping at a small diner in a neighboring town, he felt a chill run down his spine. There, faintly playing in the background, was the unmistakable sound of the signal, a slow, melancholic tune sung in an unrecognizable language. At first, it seemed innocuous enough. The patrons inside laughed and chatted animatedly, seemingly unaware or unconcerned about the music filling the air. Some even commented on how catchy it was, humming along absent-mindedly. But as Daniel observed them more closely, he noticed subtle changes. Their voices began to synchronize, overlapping in eerie unison. Conversations lost their individuality, blending into a single, monotone drone. Smiles became uniform, expressions identical, as though each person was slowly losing themselves to the same force that had consumed Elliot Hollow. The realization hit him hard. The signal had spread. It wasn't confined to one town. It had escaped into the wider world, carrying its insidious corruption across the country, and perhaps even further. Every new listener brought the risk of infection, another mind drawn into the collective consciousness. Daniel watched helplessly as the diners around him succumbed, their laughter growing hollow and their eyes distant. He knew then that this was only the beginning. As he left the diner, stepping back into the cool night air, Daniel's mind raced with questions that offered no answers. Though he had managed to escape Elliot Hollow, could anyone truly outrun the signal? Was there a way to stop it, or was humanity doomed to follow the path set by Project Phase 1, an inevitable descent into collective oblivion? The thought filled him with dread, yet he couldn't deny the possibility that the signal might represent something larger, something ancient and incomprehensible, awakening after decades of dormancy. For now, all Daniel could do was keep moving, staying ahead of the creeping tide of conformity. But wherever he went, the faint echo of the melody followed, a reminder that the signal was always listening, always waiting. And somewhere out there, other towns were waking up to the same nightmare, their identities slipping away piece by piece, until there was nothing left but echoes of what once was. As the story of Elliot Hollow fades into the shadows, we're left with more questions than answers. What do you think caused the signal? Was it a supernatural force, reaching out from another realm to consume our individuality? Or was it purely psychological, a manifestation of humanity's deepest fears and insecurities brought to life by the power of suggestion? Could it even be something else entirely? Perhaps a remnant of forgotten experiments, or an ancient entity awakened by modern technology? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Did the signal feel like something you could explain, or did it leave you with that creeping sense of unease, knowing there are some things we may never fully understand? If you enjoyed this chilling tale of identity, technology, and the fragility of the human mind, don't forget to give this video a like, share it with friends who love horror just as much as you do, and hit that subscribe button for more spine-chilling stories like this one. There's always another dark corner of the world waiting to be explored, and we'll make sure to bring its secrets straight to you. And remember, sometimes the scariest sounds are the ones you can't turn off. The ones that linger in your mind long after the lights go out, whispering secrets you wish you'd never heard. As the screen fades to black, let the faint loop of that haunting melody play softly in the background, a reminder that some stories refuse to stay confined to the past, or to the pages of history. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and most importantly, stay vigilant. You never know what might be listening.